It's a bright Tuesday morning in Manhattan. The lobby of Archer Capital gleams with polished marble and stainless steel. Board members stride past the security desk with badges clipped neatly to their jackets. But one man, Jason Coleman, pauses. At the entrance, suit sharp, shoes polished, portfolio in hand, he approaches the guard with a confident smile. "Good morning. I have a meeting on the 10th floor," Jason says. The guard, a young man with a headset, squints. I'm sorry. Sir, you need your ID." Jason presents his badge, the official investor pass, the one he's had for years. The guard frowns. "This doesn't look right. You're not on the list." Jason's heart skips. "I am an investor. I own shares. I belong in this meeting." The guard hesitates. "Sir, you can wait here. Security will confirm." Time slows. Jason's colleagues are already entering the elevator. Some glance back, confused. A woman executive whispers, "Isn't that Jason Coleman?" Jason exhales. He's been a part of Archer Capital for over a decade. He helped fund multi-million-dollar deals, advised on strategic acquisitions. And now, he's being treated like an outsider in his own building. He looks around. Marble floors, the hum of air conditioning, the gleam of glass walls, but none of it matters. All that matters is he can't enter his own boardroom. Finally, after tense minutes, the security supervisor arrives. Papers are checked, badges scanned. Jason is allowed to pass, but the moment leaves a bitter taste. The eyes of every passerby seem to whisper, "Are you supposed to be here?" And that bitter taste is just the beginning. Because what happens inside that boardroom will show exactly why status, wealth, and power aren't always enough to protect you from prejudice. Jason Coleman walked briskly through the polished lobby of Archer Capital. His tailored navy suit reflected the morning sunlight streaming through the glass facade, and his polished shoes clicked sharply against the marble floor. This was his world, or so he thought. He had invested millions, advised on major acquisitions, and sat on the advisory board. And yet, just minutes ago, the building's security had questioned whether he even belonged. He paused, taking a deep breath. The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside, watching familiar faces pass by. Some smiled politely, some whispered, their eyes darting toward him. The irony wasn't lost on Jason. The very people who depended on his insight, his money, his decisions, now looked at him as if he were a stranger. At his desk, he rifled through notes for the upcoming board meeting. The agenda included new investment strategies, potential mergers, and quarterly performance reviews. But Jason's mind wasn't on numbers. It was on the feeling of being questioned at the front desk, on the subtle weight of doubt cast by others, simply because of the color of his skin. Outside, the city pulsed with energy. Manhattan skyscrapers glinted in the morning sun, taxis honked, and office workers hurried past. But Jason felt the quiet sting of exclusion, a reminder that no matter how high he rose, the world sometimes still saw him first as a black man, and only second as a shareholder, a businessman, a colleague. He thought of the first deal he had, closed at Archer Capital, the sleepless nights, the negotiations, the trust he had earned from partners and investors. All of it seemed like a distant memory compared to the disbelief in the security guard's eyes. He wasn't just entering a building, he was asserting his right to exist in a space that had repeatedly questioned his place. Jason straightened his tie, exhaled slowly, and prepared to step into the boardroom. He knew this meeting would test. More than his business acumen, it would test patience, resilience, and the quiet strength he had honed over years of being underestimated. The boardroom was a glass-walled arena, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, bouncing off polished wood and leather chairs. Jason stepped in, and every eye shifted toward him. A few executives raised eyebrows, whispers sliding across the table like invisible currents. Despite the polished floors and the impressive skyline behind them, the air felt heavier than any. Negotiation he had faced. He cleared his throat, placing his portfolio on the table. Charts, projections, and strategies lay neatly inside, but no graph could measure the tension in the room. A senior partner, white, sharply dressed, leaned back and said, "I assume you're here for your usual advisory input?" The words sounded polite, but the tone carried skepticism, a subtle questioning of his very presence. Jason took a seat, his mind racing. He had been in countless meetings like this, guiding decisions worth millions. Yet here, he felt the invisible weight of doubt pressing down on him. Every suggestion he made, every point he raised, was met with a slightly tilted head, a skeptical glance, a pause before agreement. He wasn't invisible, but somehow he had to prove his right to speak. Again. Outside the glass walls, the city buzzed with life, horns blaring, construction cranes lifting beams, taxis rushing past. But inside, the room seemed insulated from all of that energy, a microcosm where Jason had to navigate not just numbers and strategy, but bias, preconceptions, and the silent judgment of his peers. Midway through the meeting, a key proposal came up, a multi-million-dollar acquisition that Jason had helped research and pitch. He outlined risks, potential gains, and long-term strategy. A white executive interrupted, "Are you sure your assessment is accurate?" His tone wasn't aggressive, but it was loaded. The subtext was clear. Why would he know? Jason's jaw tightened. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he presented his data again, step by step, calmly, clearly, making sure every figure, every risk factor, every potential outcome was impossible to dispute. Gradually, skepticism shifted to acknowledgement. But the moment left its mark. Even at the height of his career, respect still had to be claimed repeatedly, like a door constantly tested against the wind. After the meeting, in the hallway, a colleague approached, hesitant. "Jason, you handled that well. Most people wouldn't even try." Jason nodded, knowing she meant well, but the truth lingered. Handling it wasn't the same as changing the system. That evening, he walked out onto the city streets, skyscrapers looming above, and realized that success had its perks, but it could not shield him from prejudice. And if it hadn't changed him, it had strengthened his resolve. Jason Coleman was determined not to let this moment fade. He would turn it into action. The next board meeting arrived with more than the usual stakes. Jason walked into the same glass-walled room, portfolio in hand, ready for strategy discussions. But this time, the room felt electric. Investors and executives eyed him differently, some with thinly veiled hostility. The whispers had grown louder since last week. As the CEO began the opening remarks, an influential senior partner leaned forward. "Jason, about last week, we had concerns regarding your recommendations. Are you sure you're fully qualified to advise on this multi-million-dollar merger?" His voice was calm but cutting, laced with doubt that pierced deeper than any data challenge. Jason paused, every muscle tensed. He knew what this was, not a question of numbers, not of strategy, but of him, his presence, his credibility, his very right to speak. A decade of experience, millions invested, countless deals closed, all suddenly weighed against the color of his skin. He took a deep breath and began presenting, calmly and deliberately, laying out every detail, every contingency, every insight he had painstakingly gathered. Charts, forecasts, projections, all backed by evidence impossible to ignore. But halfway through, one of the partners interrupted, louder this time. "You clearly don't belong in this conversation." The room froze. Murmurs bubbled beneath the tension. Jason's gaze swept across the glass walls, noting every expression, some shocked, some judgmental, some wary. For a moment he felt the old sting of exclusion, the invisible walls closing in. Then he spoke. Slow, steady, every word deliberate. I've been here longer than most of you. I've invested, advised, and helped build this company to where it is today. My presence here is not a courtesy. It's earned. And if my contributions are doubted because of the color of my skin, then the problem isn't mine. It's ours as a company. A silence so thick it felt like the storm outside the city windows pressed in. Some board members shifted uncomfortably. The CEO cleared his throat, realizing the weight of Jason's words. One by one, the partners stopped interrupting, pulled their notes together, and the meeting resumed, on Jason's terms, with respect finally present in the room. When it was over, Jason walked out onto the streets of Manhattan, rain-slicked sidewalks reflecting neon lights. For the first time, he felt that his voice had been truly heard, not because of politeness or wealth or status, but because he refused to be silenced. That night, he knew the fight wasn't over, but he had won the moment that mattered most, his own right to belong. In the days that followed, the story of Jason Coleman began to ripple through the city's financial world. Colleagues, investors, and even some competitors started to see him differently, not just as a shareholder, but as a man who refused to be invisible. Board meetings no longer carried that subtle tension. His voice commanded attention, backed not only by data, but by the courage to stand firm. Outside the corporate towers, the impact was just as profound. Jason began mentoring young Black professionals, helping them navigate industries where talent often clashed with prejudice. He funded scholarships, organized workshops, and partnered with organizations that fought systemic bias in corporate America. Each initiative carried the same lesson he had lived. Belonging is not given. It is claimed and sometimes defended with quiet, relentless dignity. One evening, walking home past the city lights reflecting on wet pavement, Jason thought back to the guard at the lobby desk, the questioning eyes, and the invisible barriers he had faced. He realized that wealth and position could open doors, but true change required persistence, integrity, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. He remembered the whispers of doubt and the moments of silence in that boardroom. They no longer carried fear. They were reminders of the resilience required to create space, not just for oneself, but for those who come after. By the end of the year, Archer Capital had implemented new diversity policies, mentorship programs, and clearer recognition of contributions, regardless of background. Jason's presence was no longer questioned. He had transformed a single moment of exclusion into lasting progress for others. And as the city skyline gleamed at sunset, Jason smiled quietly, knowing that sometimes the fiercest battles are not fought in the streets or courtrooms, but in standing tall where you've always belonged. Think about it. Jason Coleman had everything on paper: wealth, influence, and years of experience. Yet, for a fleeting moment, he was treated like an outsider in his own boardroom. That moment could have silenced him. Instead, it ignited a fire. Here's the question for you. If someone with power, wealth, and influence can still face exclusion, what does that say about the barriers others face every day? And more importantly, how would you respond when your place is questioned? Would you step back, or would you claim it with unwavering resolve? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, have you ever been in a situation where you had to prove your right to belong? And if you believe stories like Jason's need to be heard, like, share, and subscribe to support real stories of justice, resilience, and courage.